Hi, welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. I'm Rob Penzak, a physician turned writer and the creator of YourGods.com. And this week, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Cornwell, an evolutionary psychologist and the executive director of the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science for the United States. Elizabeth, I know all of us feel incredibly fortunate to have you working with us, and we're thankful for the support your foundation has given this venture, along with many other ventures which encourage a reason-based approach to life.
Well, it is terrific to be a part of this adventure on the road to reason, and thank you for making me a part of this. The Richard Dawkins Foundation is very pleased to be one of the sponsors and to help this get started. And I also like to thank the audience for joining us today. We hope to make this an interactive program. Please check out our Facebook page and send us some of your questions and ideas.
Now, last week, Rick Wingrove and I introduced ourselves so that the viewers would have some idea of where we're coming from. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be involved in this and what you want to accomplish on this show?
Well, I'm an evolutionary psychologist, which looks at human behavior from an evolutionary perspective, which puts me in a position of looking at things a little bit different than most psychologists. And I was very fortunate to become the executive director of the Richard Dawkins Foundation just recently in 2010, and it's been a great deal of fun working with a terrific team. Those of you who haven't been to the website, I invite you to go to richarddawkins.net. We're about to launch our Spanish language website, which will host some of the articles and translate them into Spanish, but we'll also be bringing in articles that are pertinent to the Spanish-speaking population. So it'll be slightly different than our regular website. It'll be run by a group in Mexico City as well as some Spanish-speaking people here in the US. So please, if you get a chance, go to our website.
Well, we're happy to have you here. Why don't we get started with our main topic, marginal medicine, which is euphemistically called complementary and alternative medicine and therapies. Can you relate this to the topic of mimicry that we see elsewhere?
Oh gosh, one of the things that we see in the discussions of alternative therapies and alternative medicines and complementary medicines, which I think is actually a misnomer right there. It doesn't complement much of anything. But it's the use of scientific sounding terms that give it a legitimacy for people who don't really understand how science works, how medical science works, the kind of testing for pharmaceutical companies, and how we know what treatments work and what treatments don't, what the risks are. And unfortunately, because the alternative medicine industry is not regulated, even though it makes billions of dollars a year, it's not regulated. It doesn't have to answer to anyone, that they can make promises unlike those of medical experts and physicians and pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, I remember we talked a little bit how I think we were both shocked and appalled when we saw that the National Institutes of Health website had this whole branch for complementary medicine, and for a layperson to kind of sort through that in their head, it becomes very difficult, because if you see something on the NIH, you're going to assume it is completely legitimate.
Right. As soon as any government branch substantiates that this is a legitimate type of medicine, it's going to fool people into thinking that, hey, I can get better by taking herbal teas or water that's been diluted by astronomical proportions and still had the memory of the supposed cure that had been placed in that water. So it adds legitimacy, and it is very, very confusing for people who don't have the expertise to be able to go and look at articles in medical journals, or have the ability to go in and speak one-on-one with their physicians that they're too intimidated. So it's shocking, and I think very disconcerting that NIH has gone in this direction.
I think you make a good point about when people go on the internet and try to look for information, you almost have to know the answer before you go and look for it, because a lot of these sites very purposefully disguise everything to look like there's a lot of real scientific research behind it, to look like they've done appropriate medical studies. And you really have to know in advance exactly what to dig for and look for, and you have to know something about statistics to actually know if they're just leading you astray.
Right, and it is a responsibility of anyone who actually does know how scientific studies work to help inform their family members and friends who are thinking about doing these alternative therapies, because people reach to our alternative therapies because, one, they think it's less expensive or they think it's less harmful for some reason. Sometimes the use of the word natural confuses people, thinking, well, if it's natural, it must be good. I always remind people that, well, arsenic is natural, cancer is natural. These are not good things. So we need to be aware of the kinds of terms that people use, and that it is a critical factor in understanding how medications are tested and how we know that they can work, and the percentages of how these things work, that we don't have cure-alls for everything, that we have to be patient with how medicines work, and know that there's not an easy answer for everything.
And along with those problems that you raised, I think one other thing is that many people are very dissatisfied with the current medical system, where you go in to see your doctor and the doctor has 10 other patients that are waiting for him or her, and they're trying to just blaze through you as fast as possible. And the last thing they want to do is take a very careful history, hear all the different things that are affecting you. They just kind of want to get to the bottom line, treat you medically as quickly as they can, and move on to the next patient and their next dictation, all the other stuff they have to do. That isn't really what a family doctor used to do.
Right, right. Things have changed a lot, and that's one of the things that alternative medicine, the reason why people really like it is these people take time in talking to patients, or they have hands-on. There's nothing like the feeling of touch and having interactions with a fellow human being who you think is actually concerned with your health. And doctors are very rushed, but there is also the issue of the patient taking some responsibility in writing down concisely the kinds of things that they're experiencing, and have that perhaps to the doctor the day before, email it to the doctor or to the doctor's nurse and say, this is the situation, this is what's happening, this is how I'm feeling. And doctors also need to remember that these are people they're dealing with, and not just biological mechanisms that we need to find a cure for something, and to really listen to what the patient is saying.
Right. Yeah, I think it really takes a partnership between the care provider and the patient, but introducing all this kind of non-scientific nonsense is probably the last thing that we want to do. But why don't we move on kind of to talk about how this came about, and then maybe we can talk about some of the specific alternative medical therapies and medications that are out there. Back in 1973, Richard Nixon abolished the Office of Science Advisor for the White House. And in 1995, Newt Gingrich killed off the Office of Technology Assessment. That was the office that had been put in place to provide Congress with authoritative, impartial analysis of complicated scientific and technical issues. The thought being that legislators should have some nuanced understanding about the complicated things they were passing laws on. Now, to balance that off, that whole assault on science, one might hope that the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine was founded to debunk the kind of pseudoscience that we're going to talk about. Before it could infiltrate the whole medical system. Sadly, that would be wrong. As Dr. Paul Offit, a pediatrician and infectious disease expert at the University of Pennsylvania, notes in a May 2012 JAMA, which is one of the most respected medical journals, a commentary said that office has now spent $1.6 billion, including over $2.5 million, to find that inhaling lemon and lavender scents doesn't actually promote wound healing, that prayer does not actually cure AIDS or hasten recovery from breast reconstruction surgery, that ancient Indian remedies don't control type 2 diabetes, that magnets do not treat arthritis or carpal tunnel syndrome or migraine headaches, and that coffee enemas don't actually cure pancreatic cancer. So while real science is being starved, and they can barely get funding that they need to do studies, we see one hopeful but ultimately nonsensical study after the next, revealing that complementary and alternative therapies, which the World Health Organization defines as a broad set of healthcare practices that aren't part of the country's own tradition and aren't integrated into the dominant healthcare system. So it's somewhat nebulous, and it's different from country to country what an alternative treatment is, but that all of those do no better than placebos. Yet to the avid consumers of quackery, the data doesn't seem to matter at all. So we see $28 billion grossed for the vitamin and supplements industry in 2010. And we see almost $6 billion on chiropractic visits in 2006, with 425 million visits to providers of unconventional therapy back in 1990, which exceeded the total number of visits to actual doctors. The cost of that was about $13.7 billion, with over $10 billion of that being paid out of pocket. So that means that all these patients are kind of trusting a very fraudulent system and spending gobs and gobs of money. Now, with that as the contextual backdrop, Elizabeth, I understand that you, like many people, have lived with some degree of chronic pain. Is that right?
Yes, I have had back and neck injuries, well, back since I was 16 years old. And there is a sense of desperation when the pain gets to a level that day-to-day functioning is compromised. And I went through that recently. Just this past year, I had been diagnosed with a couple of herniated discs, 2 in my neck, 2 in my lumbar region, and it was difficult to stand up. I was having muscle spasms, and I was in horrible pain. And I understand that sense of desperation. It's just anything to make the pain go away. Please make the pain go away. And I went to neurosurgeons, and I was very fortunate. I have good insurance, and I have a doctor who was willing to listen, and I saw several specialists. We managed to get the pain under control through a variety of ways. Fortunately, I also have enough background in biology and medical sciences that I could read articles on how I could help myself. I had to be patient with myself. I tend to be very impatient in cutting back on some of the things I did, like running and so on. And so it was a learning experience for me. But I certainly understand how people will reach for anything in desperation. Had the pain not been finally subdued by real medicine, I don't know if I would have had the patience to keep going without trying something.
Well, that sounds awful, I'm happy to say, because actually, I want to know what you would say if I could help you put all of that in the past right here, right now, for the eminently reasonable cost of $19.99 plus shipping and handling. Are you interested? And if not, why not? I mean, what do you have to lose? Doesn't this sound like the chance of a lifetime?
Well, actually, what I have to lose is $19.95 plus shipping and handling. But what I really have to lose is that sense of hope, of getting better, of maybe delaying real therapy for something that doesn't work. And it's difficult for people to face the fact that there aren't going to be immediate cures. I will always have herniated discs. I will always have some pain, and we'll have to limit activities in certain ways. And that's not an easy thing for somebody to do, but I'd much rather do that. I'd much rather face reality than face a false hope that will give me nothing back. And I can engage in physical therapy and exercises and things to strengthen my muscles, to stretch my muscles, to keep myself relatively pain-free and to avoid things that might aggravate it, such as when I'm working on a computer. So being able to face that reality is so much more important. So it's worth all the money in the world to be able to understand how we can really improve our health, both our physical health and our mental health, through things that work and not rely on things that simply don't work.
So you're not interested? You want evidence before you go with my plan here?
I would like a little bit of evidence.
Well, that unfortunately could be a problem. In fact, according to a pair of studies published in one of the peer-reviewed medical journals, this one's called Rheumatology, there really isn't a whole lot of evidence supporting the use of cat's claw, feverfew, flaxseed oil, rosehip, willow bark extract, antler velvet, blackcurrant seed oil, borage seed oil, evening primrose, and quite naturally, thunder god vine, along with another dozen or so commonly used medicaments in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. Nor was there anything much to recommend magnet therapy, Tai Chi, acupuncture with or without electrical stimulation, and several other unorthodox treatments. And it's not just that the evidence is flimsy, the real problem is that the studies are practically non-existent, which means there's almost no data to go by with regard to efficacy, safety, optimal dosing regimens, or any other such fundamentals of what would more aptly be dubbed snake oil than complementary and alternative medicines. Yet the 2005 health survey for England revealed that 38% of people had, during their lifetimes, used such therapies for arthritis sufferers in particular. It's estimated that over 450 million pounds, which translates into about $750 million, was spent in 2005 in England alone, which has a population about a sixth the size of the United States. So about that 1999, plus the shipping and handling. Why do you want to make such a fuss about alternative treatments? If people want to just toss away a small amount of money, isn't that their privilege?
Well, it's your privilege to toss away your own money. I'm not going to stop you. However, it is a bigger problem than that, because it gives some legitimacy to these medicines and will convince other people to throw their money away. This is not a small mom and pop grocery store. This is a big billion-dollar industry that does great harm. It prevents people from taking on the real therapy that might actually help. And this is billions of dollars that could be used for research or to actually help people pay for real therapy that may not have insurance. So it does a great deal of harm. It isn't just my $19 or your $19. It's a lot of $19 that build a huge industry that's built on false hope and is dangerous. It's truly dangerous.
So talking about some things like that, do you have any particular knowledge on reparative therapy? Well, if you can hate away the gay, or if you can pray away the gay?
Right. I mean, this isn't just about medicine. This is about psychology as well. And as a psychologist, I'm very interested in some of the therapies that have been promoted as being real therapies, such as rebirthing therapies. But I think one of the most harmful ones that have come about is the reparative therapies, or the gay away, the pray away the gay, as is said. As many of you know, in California, it was just put into law that this type of therapy for minors would not be allowed as a legitimate therapy to be practiced by licensed therapists. And unfortunately, it's in the courts right now. It's being argued that people have a right to go and do these therapies. Now, as an adult, I'm not going to argue against that, but minors don't really have a choice. We know from all the studies that have been done in this area, reparative studies do not change the sexual orientation of someone. This is something that, whether it's purely genetic or a combination of genetics, environment, or even if it's just environmental causes, it doesn't really matter. Being gay does no harm to anyone. It is the harm comes when society rejects these people, especially when they're rejected by family and friends, when they are kicked out of their homes, especially young adolescents who are told that they're evil and that their lifestyle is wrong and that they're bullied at school. These things do cause a great deal of harm. And these reparative therapies try to, again, lay this guilt on the gay person, saying that they're going against God's will, or they're going against what is right, that they're going to hell. And this is a very harmful effect, and it's a terrible thing to legitimize and saying that these therapies actually work when we know they don't.
So you're not a big proponent of the law that would let people bully gay kids if it offended them morally or religiously? Right.
Anti-bullying laws are praised by nearly everyone. We know that bullying can be a problem. We've seen it, very tragic. There are unusual events, but tragic events of when young people commit suicide because of constant bullying. We live in an age now where, with Facebook and Twitter, that we can't escape to our homes to get out of the way of bullying. It continues not just at school, but into our own living rooms. And the only people who are against these anti-bullying legislations are people who think that bullying gay people is okay if it's religiously based. And that's sad. It's sort of sick, actually. You wonder what's wrong with these people that they think that bullying is an okay thing. In any case, is that why would we want to bully anyone? And what business is it of theirs what someone's sexual orientation is? And it confuses me that anyone should really care that much about someone else's sexual orientation.
It kind of makes it hard to understand the criticism that atheists aren't going to have any morality if they don't have a sacred text to go by, and then you see a religion justifying bullying for, God knows what reason.
Right.
Anyway, that's a lot of good issues that were raised there, and I personally think that we should start calling this, the real treatment, as opposed to, we'll talk about real treatment and fake treatment as opposed to complementary and alternative medicines. Just to drive the point home one more time of how damaging these alternate therapies can be, one of the studies that I looked into was about an autologous bone marrow transplant. And this was used for somebody with recurrent lymphoma. And they did a study of about 10, I think there were 10 patients, and 9 of them had a caregiver to help them through this very difficult process, where the cancer itself has a lot of mortality and the stem cell transplant has a lot of morbidity and mortality. And they kind of got through most of the study, and people were able to put aside some of their, what you might call magical beliefs, and get through that first segment where they did their concurrent alternative medical therapy, but they also stuck to the treatment regimen. And then several months after that first part of the study, one of the patients had a recurrence of her lymphoma, and her medical doctor or transplant team recommended that they go for another type of transplant. And the patient's husband, unfortunately, was a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, and he consulted another practitioner of Chinese medicine, I think in Hong Kong, and the woman was basically told that she had some problem with her, she was too nervous, or she was too whatever, some mystical thing, and that she needed to adhere to a diet that he would give her for 3 months, work on her, those inner spiritual things, and reject the Western treatment, and, not do another transplant. And basically her doctor didn't press it anymore. And I think that becomes a real problem because, this woman, by now, that article is several years old, is probably dead. Her husband and the specialists from Hong Kong are probably none the wiser that the treatment that they pushed her into doing, or the real treatment that they pushed her away from, put her in the ground.
And it's tragic when these kind of things happen. It's, again, this sense of desperation and being pushed by family for these types of alternative medicines. I do understand. I think we need to be sympathetic with people who gravitate towards these kind of things. It doesn't necessarily mean they're unintelligent. I mean, we saw that Steve Jobs actually delayed surgery, which probably would have kept him alive. He probably would still be alive had he not delayed it for alternative medicines. There are things, obviously there are things that we can do in addition to our proven medical therapies. Not all, things don't work 100%. They only work part of the time. There are things we can do in terms of our, trying to stay healthy and trying to stay upbeat and things like that. But those are a small portion of the issue. Reverting to what I think it's odd to call it traditional therapies, traditional Chinese therapy. Well, these are based out of mysticism. Why would someone prefer going to something that is based out of mysticism and think that that works over things that are proven to be scientifically effective? Again, it's that idea of desperation. I'm willing to try anything just to get better. And it's sad.
Right, these should be called pre-scientific treatments. It'd be a lot clearer to the patient.
Would be a lot clearer.
And over the last 100 years or so, we've doubled our life expectancy. And that's not from the 2,000-year-old techniques that didn't double life expectancy for 2,000 years. That's from the new scientific methods. Now, that was very dark talk about cancer and stuff, so I want to move on to something more pleasant, something truly wondrous. If I could cut my price in half to $9.95 out the door, no shipping, no handling, no tax, no nothing, Could I interest you in a homeopathic remedy? And if not, again, why not? I mean, for God's sake, this is less than $10.
Yeah, I could get a latte for that, and I think a latte would do me a lot better than something that's homeopathic, or perhaps a glass of wine. That certainly was much better on my back than taking something that's been diluted in water 500 times, and there's some sort of memory in the water that's going to make me better. So no, I'm sorry, I'm going to hold on to my $10 and do something a little bit better with it.
So you want at least one molecule of the active ingredients for your diet?
I think maybe a few more molecules would even be better.
And chiropractic, again, is another thing. We didn't really get time to talk about a lot of these, but they talk about the subluxation of a joint, not in the medical sense where you can actually see it on an x-ray, but some more mystical, not necessarily documentable sense, and that it allows the flow of nerve juice or whatever. And nowadays we actually can scientifically test with machines the amplitude and the speed of neurotransmissions. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we're actually running out of time almost, so we've got a couple minutes. Maybe you can tell us where the show is heading and other things.
Oh, okay, terrific. Yeah, we've got a lot of plans for this program. We really do want to hear from you, and we do have a Facebook page set up, so please send us your ideas. And if you have questions for us, please include your name and address, because if we pick your question, we're going to be sending you a little bit of booty from the show, which would be fun. But we've got some upcoming guests. We'll be having Becky Hale. She is the new president of AHA, American Humanist Association. Edwina Rogers, who is with the Secular Coalition for America. Catherine Stewart, who's the author of the Good News Club. We also will be having Richard on the show soon. Rather, we will be perhaps having that via Skype, or perhaps we'll get him to come here into the studio, which would be terrific, and you can ask him some questions. And please do take a look at the community calendar on the Richard Dawkins website. So I think that that's a couple of the ideas I think we've been tossing around, and perhaps you have something to throw in.
Well, as I've told people before, I'm kind of interested in this from not just a religious aspect. I'm not really trying to stick my finger in the eye of somebody that just wants to have a better life and to be kind to people. But I think that all of us really want to make sure that we're all treating each other well. And for some people, religion helps them do that. But I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, it leads them to do things that they would never consider doing without religion. Anyway, I think that's a wrap. Thank you for watching, everybody. As Elizabeth said, please contact us at our Facebook page, and we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll try to incorporate your ideas in our show. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.